Welcome back to New World Fantasy Football. It is getting to be that time. Recording here in July 29th, the Hall of Fame game, which will be so amazing, so juicy, so much fun. Going to tell you so much about fantasy right around the corner. And I am, of course, with my number one co-host. How you doing, Paul?
What's going on, man? I'm really glad that I earned the title of the number one co-host. I thought I would be behind some of our temporary guests and a little bit lower on the power rankings there. But we are right now in the midst of fighting for our lives in an extremely long and drawn out Dyno startup draft, a long draft, if you will.
It's a good time. It's a good time.
It is actually a good time. I kind of hate having to wait a lot of time between picks because there's an impatience factor. But I also like the fact that it just keeps teasing you, keeps bringing you back for more. You just want to see when's that next pick going to drop, and it's definitely it's been interesting so far. How you feeling about the squad?
I'm feeling good, man. And just to set the record straight, you were my fourth choice as co-host, but only one willing to do it. So here we are. Sometimes you don't get the player.
Surprise me.
Sometimes, just like a fantasy draft, you don't get the player you want, but you get the player you need. So we're here right now, and that's what I have. So, I'm loving the slow draft. First time I've done it. Maybe the last time I do it ever. I don't know. But it's really fun. And I don't have a problem waiting around for picks. It's more of, okay, when your turn is coming up and you're like a pick or two away and you got a player in mind, you're hoping they don't get sniped. But overall, I've been very excited about the picks I've been able to make. I'm not questioning a single pick, and through 8 rounds now, I'll just go ahead and say my team in order of draft of how it was drafted. So I had the 3rd overall pick. Paul had the 2nd, and we'll get to yours. But so far with real quick, set it up. It is a 12-team half-point PPR. 1 flex, 3 wide receiver, not super flex.
Yeah, okay. Not super flex. A lot of dynos do that.
A lot of dynos are super flex, which is understandable, but whatever. So Jamar Chase, Drake London, DK Metcalf, Isaiah Pacheco, Lamar Jackson, who I thought was an insane value, Zamir White, George Kittle, and just like an hour ago, I had the honor of picking my Giants running back. Hopefully he's good this year, Devin Singletary.
Yeah, and dude, that's a very solid team, and I'll get to my team in a second, but this right here, what you're hearing is a much probably chalkier Dyno draft build. I noticed in this draft it happened a lot, but whenever I heard about Dynasty, people talking about it, this is typically the way it goes. People prioritize receivers. Makes sense. You get more years out of them. Running backs, you probably get 3, 4, maybe 5 good years if you're lucky, and then you're back to the pool and going for somebody else at that point. So
to me, 5 years is kind of an eternity in a dynasty league. I mean, it's 5 years. Think about that.
Yeah.
We'll be almost 40.
What were you doing 5 years ago?
Playing fantasy.
Yeah. In 5 years, you'll be playing fantasy.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's a super solid team. I also thought Lamar was a crazy, crazy value. Especially considering that some less proven guys, a la Caleb Williams, went earlier than that. But yeah, dude, team's super solid. My team, I made the decision to zig instead of zag on my build, and it wasn't like a linear decision. So I went with Bijan at the number 2 overall because not that I dislike Jamar, but I just love Bijan that much, and I just don't think his value is going to really dip for at least 3 or 4 years of a window. I really like the runway that I have with him, and then I really wasn't planning on going on like the kind of zero wide receiver, quote unquote.
Robust RB, as the industry kind of calls it.
Yeah, so I really wasn't planning on that, except when Drake London, who's on your team, went right in front of me. And then I really battled between going with one of the receivers that I was looking at versus, who I thought was a solid value there. Really, for me, it was DK Metcalf and Devontae Smith were like the end of a big tier for me at receiver there. But I decided to go running back because I thought more running backs would go, and I thought the tier fall off was much more savage at that point. And I ended up with Travis Etienne, which, I know that you're not a big Etienne guy. I personally like him. I think after his foot injury, he's been pretty durable. I think he has a path to a good workload and will continue to touch the ball plenty in that offense. And I actually like the direction of the offense. I think it's
I've been on record saying I have a slight bias towards Jags players for whatever reason. I just do. They just don't excite me all that much. I don't know what it is. It's not based in any kind of logic. It's terrible fantasy analysis for anyone hearing this, but it's just my personal biases. I think I've had bad experiences with Jags players, and I kind of fade them a bit more than I should. So anyways, go ahead. Back to your team.
Yeah. And then I don't know what it was, man. My brain flipped and I said, fuck them receivers. And then I went Sam Laporta.
I was surprised with your Laporta pick. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a bad pick. I was just surprised with it.
I'm usually not a onesie position kind of guy. I really don't. I think the reasoning for me was it was like it felt like solid value, but it's also like, I really am trying to future-proof my team. You'll see this as I go forward for the rest of them here, but he literally had like one of the best rookie tight end seasons for fantasy ever. He's in a super stable situation. The quarterback's locked up for a while. Their coaching staff seems to really like him, and he's just good. So I went for it. And I would have been really hurt if Dalton Kincaid had made it all the way back to that fourth round for me, because that was kind of my backup plan, and then a pretty severe tier break after that. And then that's when my draft got ultra weird. CJ Stroud at the 411. I once again had other receivers that I could potentially have taken a look at there and got it done, but he's just another guy that was super young, broke out crazy in his rookie year. And as I look forward for the next 5 seasons of my team, I am very happy to just get that position just completely locked away. Tank Dell in the 5th round, right on the wrap there at 5.2.
Fun stack there. Some big touchdowns coming your way.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. I wasn't sure that he was going to come around to me, but I was pretty positive that at least him or Pickens would be there for me. Again, probably the chalkier bill would have been Pickens Dell, but I like CJ. And then I just started spamming upside receivers. Rashee Rice, we'll talk about him today. Yeah. Big upside case, big downside case. Jordan Addison, same deal. Christian Watson, same deal. Yeah. Right now, the way that I'm feeling about my team is that I think that I have 3 positional players that I feel really strongly about for a 3-year plus window. And then I have a bunch of young receivers that are wide ranges of outcomes. So it is possible that, I actually don't, I'm just going to say it right now. I don't expect my team to be one of the top teams this season. I don't, because I just didn't start it that way. And the draft didn't really fall for me that way. I think there's a lot of teams that put together really strong veteran lineups that frankly are just better. But I came into this Dyno thing trying to think long-term and think for the long haul. And I think I did that.
Yeah. And I think you've done a good job really forming your team after the first 4 rounds, and you've just kind of now been like rapid firing, as rapid fire as you can be in a slow draft, wide receivers, because you're like, okay, this is a weak spot now. I have to find something. The scariest part of your team for me is simply half of your receivers right now may end up suspended. Like it's probably not coming this season, maybe never. Who knows? However, Roger Goodell feels that particular day.
I know there's never any consistency with that. That's why I can't I just can't trust or understand it one way or another.
Yeah, so you've got that. You've also got Super Hamstring Boy and Christian Watson, who the value there is really good. The guy has top 20 upside without a doubt. He's on a good offense. He's got a good coach. He's got a good quarterback. And I think when he's healthy, he still is the number 1 wide receiver for the Packers. But he comes with a lot of risk because he has not been able to get through a season. And we'll see how that goes. But yeah, not to do a full breakdown of our team so far, but I see where you're at. I think a lot of these teams are morphing, and you can see you can kind of see where the direction each team's going and where their head's at. We've got somebody in our league. I haven't recalculated it yet, but their average age is like over 30.
Oh, team AARP. That's what I'm calling them.
Yeah, exactly. He just went full on like, who was his first?
Kelsey, Derrick Henry, Debo, Alvin Kamara, Chris Godwin. Josh Allen is fine. He's going to be.
Yeah, I mean he's fine for his age, but still it's like, okay, so he's just pushing all the chips in the middle, as you've alluded to. We've got a few teams like that. I would say I'm kind of trying to thread the needle of like compete this year, but also compete for the future, which is hard to do. But it's been fun. It's been a new thing for us, and we're really.
I'm really interested, man. I'm really interested to see how it plays out this season, because I mean you really locked in your receivers, and I think that if I had a chance to do it all over again, I think I probably would have swapped one of those onesie positions for a high level receiver, because I don't think I would be tilting face as much now in receiver, but if I can salvage my receiver situation and at least get something for this season, get one of these guys really turns out for me, then I think it'll work out well.
Yeah, and I would say because the format is 3 wide receiver, 1 flex. Obviously, you don't have to play a receiver there, but you have to play 3 wide receivers. I think that's a big reason why people were heavy wide receiver, because it could be the bulk of your points. That 3-pack grouping could be the bulk of your points every week. Really should be the bulk of your points every week. And there's so many good receivers now that I think it only makes sense to be in 3 wide receiver.
And I just felt like, but for me, I'm a whore for value. So once I see players fall that I feel like shouldn't have fallen, I get starry-eyed over there. So we'll see how it works out. It's going to be interesting.
We don't know, but we're going to find out soon enough. So the main topic of this episode, I wanted to talk about, everyone has questions when it comes to fantasy football, and before the season starts, of which guy is it going to be, who's the one you want from this team, these nebulous situations. I think, Paul, you called it murky waters.
Yes, sir.
Right? Or a lot of these teams. So I'm going to jump right in here because you already alluded to it. Let's go ahead and start with the Chiefs and their wide receivers. They have a lot of them that people know because we've always been trying to find that next version of Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill's a special player. That's not, that's not going to happen for them. But some real studs from Mahomes, and I don't even know what to do with Kadarius Toney anymore because they're trying to play him at running back because he's that bad at wide receiver.
I mean, he's going to be playing. He's going to be playing running back for the Calgary, whatever that Canadian football team is up there.
He's going to be doing a creative player on Madden. So he's going to be
doing. Yeah. He'll be playing college football 25. I just think he stinks. He always had like the suspect decision making and attitude, which you can get away with if you're a great receiver. But he has not been a great receiver, so he's going to be out of the league very soon. But I think everybody knows that, right? So like,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone is debating what the KT situation is. I think it's more so Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Sky Moore, like Justin Watson mixes in there from time to time. The ghost of McCole Hardman hangs around. So
I'll just say this: I am fully. I think Sky Moore was just a flat bust, and that's the end of it for him. Watson is just kind of your replacement level receiver. It's the other guys, and when you are looking at ADPs, both in redraft and dynasty, they are pretty close together. Because nobody knows who it is, but that's what we're going to talk about today.
Of course, Travis is still there. We are remiss to not discuss Travis.
Of course, but I just want to talk about the wide receivers specifically. Yeah. So you drafted Rashee Rice today in a dynasty league, and how are you feeling about that?
Well, let's see. I was on the toilet in my office, pretending to shit, but I was not. I was fully in the tilt room. Just trying to decide between really the two of those guys. I knew I wanted a piece of that offense in terms of, hey, Paul, you really need to address receiver right now. And in terms of upside plays being attached to the Chiefs, Mahomes, the whole shebang, I was just between those two guys, and it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was really hard for me because there's cases to be made on both sides with Rashee Rice.
The second guy, are you talking about Worthy? Did you say that?
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't actually say his name because it's been on my mind all day.
I figured, want to make sure.
Yeah, so it was between Worthy and Rice, and the cases are actually really, really interesting to be made, and it was very close for me because on one hand, well, you have a guy that proved it last year. He was effective. He was good for fantasy. He was rising near the end of the year. He's already been in the offense. He has a rapport with Patrick Mahomes, but he's a moron that drives way too fast and crashes his car and flees a scene and could possibly get suspended. So that has to be a factor in the conversation. And Xavier Worthy is a fucking lightning bug. He is crazy fast. You know that type of archetype of receiver we've been looking for so badly for Mahomes. And he's not just a fast guy. He has some production coming in from college. It's not nothing, right? He was drafted higher than Rashee Rice in a very good and deep wide receiver class. And he looks good, right? He passes the eye test. So there's a lot of theoretical things with him of where it could go, but we haven't seen it, right? Because you could have said a lot of the same things about Sky Moore in theory, very exciting prospect coming in, but it just didn't materialize, right? And the other thing with Worthy that ultimately was the tiebreaker for me was I just have not seen the deep bomb game in Kansas City in several years. They've run a very effective offense with very minimal down the field throws that has led them to back-to-back Super Bowls. Now, if it opens up and they're able to get that and they hit that, that's the highest value target you can ever get is 20 plus yards down the field, and he's going to get those. But I became just too afraid of, because of my specific situation in this dynasty league, and I need production out of that receiver now. I'm afraid that the first year of Xavier Worthy, even if he has a great 3-year outlook this year, I'm afraid that he may be more MVS than he is, 2021 Hollywood Brown, for example, right? So
I get you, and I know you're talking about these players in the context of your decision today. So you kind of already made
a lot of people are between those guys with similar.
Yeah, definitely are, because they are close together in redraft. They are close together in dynasty in terms of ADPs. Yeah, I feel like Rashi is a good player, not a great player. I think that the Chiefs overdrafted him because they just needed somebody that could be a possession guy for them who's actually consistent. And Rashi got a lot of his points after the catch. But you know what? Mahomes is so good that he's going to find him wide open enough, and he's got the ability to make big plays from there. So I like Rashi as a player. Not like ecstatic about him as a player, but he's on a fantastic offense. So that's the bull case. Obviously, the bear case is, jail time or suspension or whatever it may be. And other guys coming in matter too. So like you already alluded to, you already said Travis still there. I would imagine his snap count goes down a bit, but he's going to be there in the red zone.
Yep.
You've got Xavier Worthy. I like him as a prospect, but you know who else a lot of people liked? John Ross. He kind of compares like John Ross a lot. And I mean, that guy was a colossal bust, unfortunately. Now, you can be really fast and be really good, but being really fast doesn't make you really good. And I think sometimes that's the analysis and where it starts and stops with some receivers. And I think it's ridiculous. You get a lot of people that they can't help but imprint.
Fast guy, go Burr.
Yeah, they can't help but imprint their Madden logic onto real world logic. And, Xavier Worthy's a 75 overall. I'm just making that up. In Madden, but he's 99 speed. Therefore, he's going to play like a 95 overall in Madden for me. So I think that happens too often with people's analysis.
It does, but I will say that, and I know that I mentioned this already in speaking with it. Yeah, the John Ross allegations, he'll have to beat those because that there's been plenty of fast guys that come into the league and don't do much. But he
Darius Hayward Day.
Yeah. He was in a big school and he did produce. It's not like some of these guys come in, it's like, hey, you're a 22-year-old. Hey, you only did anything in your junior season. Hey, you know what I'm saying? Like there's guys that come in and they don't have the early breakout age or the production profile. He has some of that stuff. It's not like he dominated
he has
Jamar
things
Chase or whatever, but
he has things you want for sure. And then let's not just omit the most veteran receiver that they have on their team that they paid is, Marquise Brown or Hollywood Brown, if you'd like to call him that more. I call him Marquise because to me, he's never earned Hollywood. Paul, let me ask you a question. I'm going to quiz you on the spot. What is Marquise Brown's best finish of his career? Wide receiver, what?
I think he had a pretty good season once in Baltimore.
Correct.
So I think he probably, especially because of the way you're framing the question, I'm going to think that he finished just outside of wide receiver 2 territory. I'm going to say wide receiver 26.
Great guess. 24.
Dang. Okay.
A lot of his other finishes are 30 and even 50. And he had some injuries mixed in there. He's had some trouble with his quarterbacks getting hurt, blah, blah, blah. It's year 6. Your highest is barely scraping a wide receiver 2. Yes, you're now in a better offense. But once again, we're talking about this because it is a nebulous situation. Worthy could hit. Rashi could not get suspended. Hollywood, maybe he's a 5 or 6 target a week guy in this offense, which is okay if he's going to be hyper efficient. The Chiefs, to me, have the formula down so well for what makes their team work. And last season, they were able to be a more balanced team, which is why, the Mahomes fantasy finish was not as good as people wanted because they said, you know what? Our defense is good now. We have the best defensive coordinator in the league. My man Spags, miss you, Steve Spagnuolo, former Giant coach, but He's a great defensive coordinator. Their defense is good. Their running game is good. Their O-line is good. The offense can just operate smoothly. It's got all these different ways to beat you from every angle, and they are going to play to what they need in the game. And if they get a lead and it's not the first half and it's not through the air, there's going to be games where their wide receivers just don't really blow up. And then at the same time, if one blows up, which one is it?
Right.
We're having that problem right now.
No, and that's always like how many times are we going to keep allowing the Chiefs to keep fooling us over and over and over again? They move guys in and out. It's different receivers all the time. And that was the biggest difference for me, because what I liked about Rashi was his weekly upside is capped. It is, because he's not getting I don't have the numbers in front of me, but his percentage of the downfield targets is low. He does a lot of his damage underneath. But what I like about that is that, like, okay, I feel like he can actually own that role on the team, that he can actually have that and be that guy on the team. I think X Worthy was drafted to replace Hollywood Brown, but I think right now in that go run cardio until something pops open, I think that role belongs to Hollywood for now, which also makes him a tough redraft / fantasy dynasty option. So I just think that, that's the dart throw that I threw, because again, like, I was a little thirsty for upside. I put myself in that situation, but I think this murky water stays murky, man. I don't know if I recommend people swimming in it unless you have to.
Yeah, and like I'm gonna go ahead and pull up Rashi's numbers real quick and just see what we're looking at. I mean, okay, it's a rookie year. We have to give, like, he's not done developing. At least we don't think so. He's 24 now, which is a little bit older for a sophomore, but I say that like it's college football, but like, his second year wide receiver. But what I'm really interested is the yards per catch, right? So his yards per catch was almost 12, which is good. You really can't complain with that. It's not amazing, but it's good enough to get the job done.
It's better than I thought, to be honest with you.
If it's a big if, he's getting the volume though. So I don't think any of these guys are going to get the volume. I think you're right, Paul. I don't think there's an answer here. And let's just finish it off with the Chiefs wide receivers and you might have already had this answer because you made that decision today. If you're picking one, who are you going with?
Yeah,
and let's keep it in the context of just this year.
Just redraft, I'm getting Rashi, because I think that his court date isn't until December, so I don't think it's going to impact the fantasy season this year. And I think he's proven that in the context of this offense, you can at least expect a decent weekly floor for him.
Right. And where you're drafting him,
yes.
It depends what your team needs. If you need high upside, great. If you don't,
I think in a vacuum, Worthy is probably the best dynasty asset, though, if you ask me.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the thing about dynasty is you are trading like it's a stock market a bit too. So even if Worthy doesn't have a great season, and it's not a catastrophe, and he gets injured or something like that, if he doesn't have a Quentin Johnston type season,
yeah,
you can make the case he's going to break out year two and not lose value. So let's move on to another triplet of wide receivers. I think it is obviously by ADP the highest level of trio that's going, and that's the Texans wide receivers. So I'll go ahead and start with this one. And I'm just going to flat out say it. I'm not afraid to say it. I love this man. I think Nico Collins is their one, and that's it. Yeah, I do. And I'll go down with that ship. Now, is he their one by a mile? Like, I don't know. It's not the Cowboys where it's CD and no one else that really matters all that much. But I do think that come into the season, he's going to be the most highly targeted wide receiver on this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, he played like their one. He was the most available guy for, CJ start to finish. He's got the prototypical size. He's pretty fast for his size. So there's a lot of things to like. But I do have to disagree with you in terms of like saying that he is like absolutely the one. I just don't think I don't think that we can say that necessarily right now, for a number of different factors. I think that Tank really flashed for me. I thought that, yes, Tank, the argument against Tank is that he's not a tank. He wishes he was a tank. He's extremely slight.
There are smaller tanks out there.
Fair enough.
There are.
And yeah, man, I mean, like, but he flashed ability to not just his size would suggest that, hey, this guy might end up in the slot one of these days, but he ran a lot of routes on the outside. He won on the outside well. So like, I don't know. I think it's fair to say Nico is the receiver to own right now today. But I think that if we were having this conversation 2 seasons from now, it wouldn't shock me if they had to make a choice between Nico and Tank. I think as a team, given draft capital, given that it took this man three years to break out, it wouldn't shock me if they prioritize Tank over him.
It's hard to break out when you have the worst O-line and you have Davis Mills or whatever his name is. Am I getting that right? Davis Mills, Dave, as your quarterback. He's still pretty young. I think Nico's 25, and they just paid him a buttload of money, so they believe in him. I think Diggs was really brought in as that cherry on top to really compete for a Super Bowl this year. When you have this level of receivers, you never know. The defense never knows where to go. They're going to constantly be in conflict. But I'm just going to say this. Whether it be, I guess Dynasty, the ages kind of make Diggs in like the last place. But in redraft, it's wide open. In my opinion, this one is just choose your fighter. Just take the one you like the most and live with it. Because while Nico's my favorite, it just as easily could be the other two as their best wide receiver. And it could be a 1A, 1B, 1C. It could be a 1, 2, 3. We just don't know. And probability would say that somehow, some way, along the course of a season, an injury is going to kind of work things out. As sad as that is to say. And you just hope you don't have the one that gets hurt.
So it's interesting. Neither of us said Steph Diggs. And obviously, if you're talking about Dynasty, that, it doesn't shock me that Stephon Diggs doesn't seem to have a lot of runway left. But this year, it seems like you're more of a Nico guy. I'm more of a Tank guy. But neither of us are a Steph guy. Does this mean that it is RIP for Steph officially as a high level fantasy asset?
I definitely don't think that. I just think that Diggs is going to be pretty much like the Jarvis Landry, where Stephon Diggs is better than Jarvis Landry. That's not what I'm saying. But just that role of being that underneath guy and getting a lot of the targets are not going to be, in my opinion, like he's not going to be getting the highest value targets And one thing Diggs does have going for him, and I'll make this bull case for him. He's the most proven receiver. Trust comes there. And he's a squeaky wheel kind of guy. Whether you like that or you don't, it has proven to matter. Locker rooms matter. Morale matters. If you have somebody in your locker room that's severely unhappy, it's going to bring the team down a bit. And Diggs is that kind of guy. Now, coming to the Texans, I don't know if he's maybe had a change of, maybe not necessarily a change of heart, or just like, okay, I'm not number one in the pecking order, so I don't have the credibility with the Texans front office or whatever to be as boisterous. But a lot of it's going to come down to, are they winning games? I think we're entering the Odell Beckham phase of Stephon Diggs, where teams, whether it be fantasy or real life, are going to be chasing that magic that was, and he's going to keep getting contracts, and maybe he stays with the Texans. I don't know. It's going to depend if they're winning and if he's happy there. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's over, to answer your question, for Diggs. I think he will be fine, but I don't think it's smart to look at him like he's going to be the world beater for your fantasy team anymore.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And the Texans are in a great spot because of how awesome CJ Stroud was in his first year.
Yeah.
They're playing with house money. Go sign Steph Diggs to borrow him for 2 years and elevate CJ's play. And it's going to cause nebulousness in the weekly upside of each of these receiving options. But I agree with you that I expect that when everybody's healthy, which is not a guarantee to start the season, Tank's coming off an injury too. But when everybody's healthy, I expect Steph to settle into a role where he's going to be more of a possession guy. And that's scary for the rest of the league, because possession Steph is a very dangerous Steph.
Absolutely. And that you can be a high-end possession guy. I mean, Michael Thomas was the number one wide receiver 1 year and he was just a possession monster. Just every slant was boom, 10 yards, 10 yards, 10 yards. Also a lot of touchdowns.
It sounds like even though it's murky waters, you can pick a swim lane and move forward, which I think you have.
Yeah, when you look underneath the surface of that murky water in Texas, it's pretty clear. Like, they're all good.
Yeah.
They're all worth picking.
Yeah.
So just because Steph's my least favorite doesn't mean I think he's terrible.
So I'll throw an over-under to you, actually, now, which is different than this, but just to end things off. With these 3 awesome receiving options and another year of development, really, I think it would surprise people to know that CJ only tossed 25 touchdowns last year, which, again, is a lot for a rookie, but it's not a lot for fantasy.
Yeah.
Over under 35 this season. That would be a huge jump. That would be a crazy
for
jump.
CJ, I'm going to go under. I'm going to go under. But when I say under, I think like 32, 33.
That's
35 is a high mark.
That's sniffing the back door of QB1.
If you played in a 6 passing touchdown, maybe,
then it would be better.
He's not really going to be getting you big time rushing stats that, as the cheat code for fantasy. But especially in a dynasty league, CJ Stroud, it does feel like he's going to be a mainstay for a decade plus.
I certainly fucking hope so.
The only thing I can say about the bear case for that is people thought Baker Mayfield was the shit after 1 year. There's been quarterbacks who have looked great year 1, fallen off year 2, and never really recaptured it. There's been cases like that. Justin Herbert was the best.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Pearsall.
I get you. People are still gagging off year 1 of Justin Herbert and saying he's elite. And it's like, he's had some things not go his way. And he's very good. but people were ready to crown him after 1 year as the next Peyton Manning.
Absolutely. And I think that we were too early to just say that he was going to be the man for fantasy forever. But I will go down the same way that, you'll go down with the ship on your take. I'm going to go down with the ship that Justin Herbert's lameness over the last two plus seasons, that's a Chargers thing, not a him thing, in my opinion. And
I think
why I
very
trust him for fantasy right now, because I still don't trust the Chargers.
Yeah.
Not yet. Not yet.
Man, I think Herbert's a really good quarterback, but people talk about him. You hear it on every broadcast with him. This guy's so good, so good. Dude has never won a freaking playoff game. Daniel Jones has won more. You know what I mean? I know it's not necessarily a fair argument across the board, but you get where I'm going with it. A year one excitement doesn't make a career-long stud.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a great segue to actually fork into two possible conversations. I name dropped Ricky Pearsall. We can talk about the nebulous, murky situation in San Fran, or we can stay on the Chargers because they have their own nebulous situation going on.
Let's go ahead and stay on the Chargers and talk about more wide receivers and running backs.
Side note, I'm on the clock. And for anybody that's in our league that is listening, I'm not picking right now. I'm sorry. I'm not going to make a shitty pick in the middle of trying to talk.
No, put that phone. I threw my phone over there because I know if you pick, then I go next. Yeah, man. Just
so we're going to be taking our time.
You got time,
boys.
And by the time they see this, that pick will have been made. We think maybe.
Hopefully,
we'll see. So, Chargers, man.
Receivers.
You want to talk about the receivers because their running backs are a little weird too, but we'll start with the receivers.
Well, like the Chargers outside of Herb, like it's all kind of weird, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got Quentin Johnston. We'll just go with the receivers. You got Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey, Josh Palmer, who's been there, and that's all I care about. So, Ladd across consensus is the highest taken. How do you really feel about that?
How do I say this? Because I had a metaphor come to my mind, but it is podcast inappropriate. So I will shift the metaphor slightly and say it's 1:59 a.m. at the local bar, and you've struck out every which way, and you turn to the left, and the hard 3.5 that has been throwing looks your way and winks your way still isn't looking very good, but you slam another shot, and you got to go home with somebody. You have to go home with somebody in this receiver room. I still am a believer in Justin Herbert. I still think he's a very good quarterback and capable of holding up a fantasy receiver. Keenan Allen is a highly injured shell of himself, but was still a highly, highly effective receiver last year. Not that I certainly think that Ladd McConkey is the next coming of Keenan Allen, because he's an older guy. The breakout age wasn't fantastic. He doesn't pop off the page as an incredible receiver, but you know who he pops off against? Huge. Like, I think that Huge would just make anybody look like a superstar. So, like, yes, he should be the number one because Josh Palmer's a Jag. DJ Chark's a Jag. Huge is on his way to becoming a Jag very soon. So, the fact that Ladd McConkey looks like he can be a effective possession style receiver, I'll take that. I will take that.
Yeah. I do feel like the fantasy football world has a tendency now to want to overrate rookies and push down sophomores that don't they don't break out right away. I don't really think that's fair. how low is he's not going like he's not super cratering, but JSN is like pretty far down on the ADP, and it's like, man, he has a chance to really break out this year. He's competing with an aged Tyler Lockett. But anyways, we can talk about that one later.
He's undervalued, but the difference is JSN looks good. JSN had a great production profile coming into the league. I'm just not. And this is an anti-Lad thing. Like, I think Lad will be fine. I don't think he's going to be, I don't think he's a future Hall of Fame receiver or anything like that. But this is more anti-Huge versus pro Lad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you. You're saying if you've got to pick one, it's going to be Lad. And I get that. I mean, the community agrees with you. But, man, there's a lot of talent, raw talent in that Huge body. And just to clarify, when we say Huge, we're stealing that from the fantasy footballers. That's what they call Quentin Johnston. But it's a great nickname. So it came from QJ. So they said Huge. Pretty good. I saw a highlight of Quentin Johnston the other day from Chargers practice where the ball was away from him. He did not high point it. He pushed his body away from it and caught it out like this, like over here, like basically basket caught it. Quentin Johnston is just not a good receiver. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the physical traits at all. He is not good at playing wide receiver. And it's funny because they took him in the first round last year. They have to try to make it work and salvage anything from them. I don't care how low Quentin Johnston is. There are other players around him that I believe in more. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, and so, what's interesting, man, talking this out, I have a question for you. Is their receiver room even murky at all? Or is it clear that it just sucks?
I think it's clear that Lad will be Mr. Necessary in the offense. And that is important for fantasy because that means he's getting a lot of targets. There is trust with Josh Palmer. He will be sitting there during the bye weeks and you happen to fall into a rough one where you got an injury or two, you got a few bye weeks, and Quentin Johnston will be staring at you in the face just like, the slow fat kid on the playground, like, please pick me up, please. I don't want to sit on the sidelines again. And you're going to be like, God damn it. All right, fine. Because he has produced sporadically for the Chargers.
Yeah.
When he has been Mr. Necessary, he has been okay. But it's like, man, the weird thing about the Chargers wide receiver room is this. The only wide receiver that's been drafted by this current regime has been Lad. We don't know if they really give a shit about Quentin Johnston. They brought in TJ Chark for depth. He's a guy that's never really panned out. It's such a weird situation there on the Chargers because you do have a talented quarterback that you feel can make something happen. And their pass catching running back whiz is no longer there. Like, dude, value included for these wide receivers, I still think Lad's the only one I'm willing to even bother with.
Yeah, in redraft, that's the only. Yeah, I mean that's really it for me. I mean, the rest of these guys, like, I'm gonna stop stealing from the ballers, and he doesn't even deserve a nickname, Mr. Johnston. is unworthy of a roster spot on my team. He will be taken at some point on somebody else's team, and then he will be dropped, and maybe I'll pick him up on the waivers. A more interesting conversation, I think, is between the Gus bus or, JK. I thought I was going to have a good season this year. So why don't we pivot to that?
Yeah. They brought in a rookie in like the 6th round named Kamani Vidal, who he's a 6th round running back.
Yeah, I mean,
who knows? They can work out. Isaiah Pacheco was a 7th rounder. Ahmad Bradshaw was a 7th rounder. There's been some undrafted running backs, so it can happen.
Pretty low hit rate.
It's a very low hit rate. Man, I do think that Gus Edwards, he's hard to judge because he's been on one of the best, like a top 3 situation for running backs. Baltimore they just get production. Whoever their running backs are, they just get production. So now he's going over to a team where their running back production has been Austin Eckler. But now you're also going into a situation where the expectation is Harbaugh and Greg Roman are going to be a old school run the ball a ton team. So you're kind of trying to figure out volume, efficiency, all of that. But for me, I have given up on J.K. Dobbins. I think the talent is probably all but sapped with all the injuries he's had. It's sad, but it's true. And Gus is just one of those guys that he's not exciting. He can get into the end zone, and he can be a wide receiver 3 for you, running back 3 for you. Get you some good weeks, score a few touchdowns.
Yeah, it feels foolish to keep getting burned by the J.K. Dobbins hype over and over and over again. I think both these players are going to get worked in. I don't love putting all of my. I guess, yeah. I mean, either of these guys you're drafting as an RB3 or later, so it's probably fine. Gus Edwards is the guy that is most likely to give you okay production, but it's team built. If you need a home run swing, if you're desperate, if you went for a 0 RB build or what have you, look, it's probably a bad bet with 2 major injuries in recent years to JK, but I just think Gus Edwards, a lot of his production came from touchdowns and the Ravens' awesome offense, which I think that as we're going through this exercise, I'm realizing that the Chargers will not be an awesome offense. So, I think Gus is the higher floor player. JK still has that ceiling, but he'll probably get hurt again. I hate to say it, but it's the truth.
Yeah, we can stop talking about them now. It's kind of depressing.
It is a little bit. Let's talk about something maybe a little more fun. Want to talk about some San Fran?
Absolutely. I love talking about San Fran.
It's a good team.
So is Christian McCaffrey still the running back 1? I'm not sure. He's getting old.
Yeah, no. It's like we got to fade him. He's hitting that cliff.
Yeah, right. He's like maybe like the slightest of slope, like tiny bit. Yeah, he's good. All right. Moving on.
Enough said. What about this interesting receiver room for Mr. Brock Purdy that was extremely effective last year?
It's pretty good.
But everybody's seeing the news stories. Everybody's seeing the stuff getting thrown around. Is Debo going to stick around? Is Ayuk going to stick around? Is it Ricky Pearsall season? What are your feelings on the matter?
I think that when all this dust settles, Debo's going to be there. Ayuk's going to be there, at least for this season. Beyond the season, I don't think so. I think Ayuk is gone. But for this season, yeah, I think it's Debo, Ayuk. And you know what? I'm sorry, but I got to stand up for my guy. Juwan motherfucking Jennings is a good wide receiver, a hell of a blocker, a great teammate, one of the most underrated people that everybody forgets about. So, yes, do I like Ricky Pearsall's prospects? And will he fit right in because this offense just hums along? And especially if they made sure they got him in the first round, yeah, he's going to be just fine. But we don't talk about Juwan Jennings, and he's a good player. He's not a fantasy player, really, that you really want. I know, but fuck. I like that guy a lot. So
he's a really solid player that fits in really well with their system.
He is a blocking machine out there. There are so many highlights, man. Just go watch last year's highlights of McCaffrey, and there is a lot of highlights where Juwan Jennings out there blocking, man. And I know this is fantasy football. You're not getting points for blocking, but man, he's a freaking good player. He's a luxury. I like him. Anyways, I'm going to stop gushing about Juwan Jennings. Yeah, man, I think you're kind of looking at it like this. This is my overall viewpoint of the 49ers wide receiver room. It's going to be much of the same. It's going to be a lot of Debo underneath, a lot of very efficient routes, intermediate and deep to Ayuk, and you're going to see Juwan Jennings play plenty. Early downs, you're going to see Ricky Pearsall is going to get worked in. I think that pick was more so, hey, we might lose Ayuk this season. We need to have a guy to step right in. That was the worst case scenario for them, but they also are like, well, ideally we're going to hold on to him, and Ricky can work in sporadically. He can get his feet wet, and we can teach him our system. And then next year, when Ayuk is inevitably gone, now we can unleash Pearsall.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, while you were talking here, I actually looked up Debo's contract. It's $15 million a dead cap. It would hurt, but they can get out after the end of this season too. So it's going to be interesting. I wonder if there's a chance, because Ayuk's younger, right? I wonder if there's a chance that they work something out with Ayuk and slice off Debo.
Yeah, I think
it's very interesting to see what's going to happen.
I think the writing on the wall is one of them is gone. They might not even know which one, but one of them is gone next year for money reasons. So the gravy train for Purdy's gonna end after this year. I like Purdy, don't get me wrong, but he's had such an amazing situation around him.
In fact, if you put a pistol to my head and told me I have to choose one at the end of this 2024 season
to stay,
I'm saying if I have to choose one between the two, I think probably Ayuk. But I don't know, and that's why I was unwilling in our draft to take the risk of not knowing what his situation is going to be like. But I think that talking about Ricky Pearsall, a little bit of an older player. I hate calling a 24-year-old old because I'm old in that scenario, but a little bit of an older incoming rookie. Doesn't it feel like he's a little bit more Debo-ish than he is downfield burner, X-receiver type of guy? If he had to replace one of those guys.
I think he's more of like the quintessential Y than the X. I like what he can bring. I think that he can be versatile. The thing about the 49ers is that scheme just gets guys open. And I think Pearsall can run that scheme just fine. I think that he's going to be a very good possession guy for them that could also add some dynamic stuff to the wide receiver room. So, yeah, let's just put it this way. Dynasty, go for it. Shanahan's not going anywhere. Brock Purdy's not going anywhere. The core of that team is good. Redraft, I wouldn't expect Ricky Pearsall. Besides a major injury happening, I don't expect him to just come. Because, I mean, what has been the issue, if you want to say there's been any issue at all in San Francisco, the issue that people talk about in fantasy for San Francisco is they have so many mouths to feed. We've got McCaffrey. We've got Ayuk. We've got Debo. Don't forget about Kittle. Like, so you got these 4 stud position skill players on your team, and you think Ricky Pearsall is just going to walk in and be like, hey, I'm the guy now? Like, no. They're competing for a Super Bowl. No. It's not happening right away. It's going to take a major injury or 2 for him to really have to be a focal point of that offense.
Yeah, and I think, as a dynasty asset, I think he has some serious shrib, but I just wouldn't expect anything this year either. So yeah, I agree. I think we're good.
So let's talk about some running backs, dude. And I want to talk about the Broncos. Man, is there a harder room in the league to decipher running back wise? Can you think of any?
A harder room to decipher, I would have to think about that. I'm not sure, but there is not a sadder room to have to decipher than this room.
They just walk into the room. It's like it's running back meetings. They're all just already crying, just like upset. Like,
dude, I'm crying. I'm crying. We talked about Javonte when we did the Broncos thing.
We've been talking about him for years. We want it, but he seems like a nice kid. We want it for him, but it just hasn't happened. And so, like, Javonte is the guy that I think I'm just going to bottom line it. If you're going to take a shot, then you're taking a shot at Javonte. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is he's a fine bit player, but he's a bit player. And I just don't think that if it's not Javonte Williams returning to form after his massive injury, then I don't think I want anything else in this room. Let me ask you this question. Did you think Darren Sproles was a good fantasy player?
For a couple seasons, yeah.
Why?
Well, he was quick, he was fast, he was in a great scheme for it, and the running back incumbent didn't get it done.
Sure. And I would say part of that, as you like to say, Sean Payton is a breeze merchant, right? So I'm going to go ahead and shut down, based off my fantasy football authority, this Jaleel McLaughlin talk, because Sean Payton is a douchebag. I say that with sincerity, but he's a liar. He's a scumbag. I can't stand him. I can't stand his face. He's lying. And everyone around him is lying, because Jaleel McLaughlin is nowhere near the caliber of player that Darren Sproles was. But they're wanting to just assign that role over to McLaughlin.
That's not even the biggest whopper he told. He tried to compare Bo Nix to Drew Brees. That's crazy.
And that's hilarious. If we were talking about the whole Broncos team, I'd make that point too. But let's just go ahead and talk about it. Bo Nix is nowhere near. I said it on the last podcast, I'll say it again. Bo Nix, I'm looking right at the camera. Bo Nix fucking sucks. He's fucking trash.
Clip it.
Yes, put it on Twitter. Put it on Twitter. Like, you were Van Wilder out there in your seventh freaking year of college football, and you're like, I'm so good, I can complete screen passes on Oregon. Shut the fuck up. You suck, bro. I could run that fucking system. Anyways. So on an inefficient offense with a shitty quarterback, you really think any of these guys have a chance to be anything in fantasy this year?
Look, I do think one guy has a chance. Because the thing is, dude, it's not like Javonte Williams is only college production to go off of. He never showed anything. He had a stretch at the NFL level where he was legitimately very good. He had a stretch.
Bo Nix wasn't the quarterback.
He's only 24. He's now a full season plus. You said it yourself. Let's not count the injury twice against him.
I don't.
So if anybody has a chance, yeah, of course Javonte has a chance. Do I think it's a very high chance? No. And I don't think that, I don't think he's going to be a particularly efficient player just because the offense, I don't think, is going to be very good. But there's plenty of running backs out there that are not extremely efficient players that still find a way to be effective for fantasy. So I think it's still worth the shot if you believe, but you have to believe. You're never going to get Javonte at such a crazy discount that it's you're playing with house money. You're going to have to plant your flag if you want the guy.
I mean, none of these guys are going particularly high.
But I'm saying, if you end up with just an injured nothing on your team, it'll suck. But yes, you're not taking him early rounds.
Yeah, I can see that. I want to look up the expected points for the Broncos this year. It might be a little bit of a difficult stat to find on the fly, but I'm willing to bet they're gonna come in pretty low. I'm not gonna worry about it right now. And you also have Javonte could be fine for fantasy, I think, if he's getting the volume. You got another running back in the room in Jaleel. You got another one in Audric Estime, who was just brought in. He's a young guy. He's a power back.
Samaje is still there.
Samaje is still around. He might get cut. We'll see. But yeah, got a lot of names there. No one particularly jumps off the page except for Javonte has a chance. I think that this is just a desperation running back room. Take a shot on Javonte if you need to. Which, funny enough, one of the people in our league has him currently. Their RB1 is Javonte Williams.
One of our friends is repeatedly texting me. I wonder who it is.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, it's 9:41 on the East Coast, and I am the commissioner of this Dynasty League. I have it set to pause between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. So, if Paul doesn't make a pick within 19 minutes, the draft will be stopped for 12 hours. Big deal. We have plenty of time. Who cares? But they want to act like if the hair's on fire. It's just calm down.
Oh, I love our impatient friends. I do understand them. Is there anything worth talking about with these receivers, or do you want to scoot?
Sure. Why not? Because you know what? Very quickly, I've already been on record. I made it pretty obvious that I think Bo Nix is trash. Even trash quarterbacks might have a little bit of value. Everyone seems to have given up on Marvin Mims already, which I think is ridiculous. Troy Franklin is the new hotness. All right, not really thinking Troy Franklin's going to be anything amazing. Cortland Sutton's still around. Tim Patrick's still alive somehow. I don't know, man. You know what? Let me just make this really easy for everyone. Don't draft any Broncos. Okay? Thank you. Done.
I still think that there's a couple worthy dart throws in here in redraft, because there's a couple guys that I actually like even like Marvin Mims. Like I like his speed. I like what I've seen in just the little bit that he's been able to be unleashed out there. So I think there's decent dart throws, but for a redraft purposes, I think Javonte can have some decent volume and will be better this year. So if you are a believer, I am not making a strong endorsement, but if you're a believer, go ahead. Now,
yeah, can't tell you what to do in fantasy. Do what you want.
Speaking of bad quarterbacks in the AFC West, the Las Vegas Raiders decided to give us another murky situation, yet another one this season.
Great draft pick.
After drafting, fairly well thought of college tight end in the early part of the draft last year in Michael Mayer, they went ahead and drafted another very, very, very highly thought of college tight end in Brock Bowers in the, was it top 10 picks? Was it top 10?
I want to say it ended up being 13th overall. He fell a bit because their receivers and quarterbacks started flying, and yeah.
So we're calling this a murky situation. I think it's weird, a little bit weird process on their end, but before I give my thoughts about it, why do you feel like it's murky, and what are your thoughts overall between the two players and how you feel about Brock's potential first season?
Let me first say this. I do think that Bowers will lead this tight end room as a fantasy player. He is the weapon more so than Michael Mayer, I think, can be, just from a physical standpoint and a talent standpoint. Listen, there has been teams in the past that have had multiple tight ends that have been good for their team. I think that Mayer having a year of experience under his belt is going to matter. But yeah, man, I think Bowers is absolutely going to come in and he's going to command targets right away. What scares me about this whole Raiders, I'm just going to say pass catching situation, as of right now, Devontae's still a Raider. And this is a guy, if he stays healthy the whole season, he's commanding at least 160 targets, which leaves roughly 340, we'll just say 500 targets total to go around. Antonio Pierce has stated he wants to be a run the ball kind of team. Well, that's all fine and well until you start losing.
Yeah.
But still, their neutral game script is going to lean run. Devontae's got to get his targets. Of the remaining targets left, Jacoby Myers, another kind of forgotten guy. He's not awful. He's a pretty good receiver. You still got Mayer there. So, and then you're having to also chop up between Aiden Minshew and Gardner O'Connell. I'm just going to go ahead and morph them into one person here. How many touchdown passes do the Raiders really have in them? 20? Less? It's going to be really difficult to have week-to-week consistency. It's already hard for tight ends to have that.
I think Gardner Minshew raises their floor a bit. So I think that, I actually look, I get it. They would probably be incentivized to see what they have in Aiden O'Connell. I don't really love him personally, but I think that if it ends up being Gardner, I think he can toss 20 to 25, something like that. But yeah, you're right. Devontae's a damn target hog too. And so it sucks that Bowers went here because I think rookie tight end numbers are usually depressed anyways. And now you add into the fact that he goes into a very murky offensive situation with the quarterback controversy. Neither of them have a ton of upside. They already spent a lot of money on Michael Mayer, who was pretty good last year, all things considered.
They didn't spend any money. They spent the draft pick.
I mean draft capital, rather. So they already spent a lot of draft capital in the tight end, but it's a very linear feeling for me personally. In a dynasty context, Brock Bowers is bulletproof. I think he's that good.
Yeah.
He was,
I agree.
I mean, dude, I don't watch college. If I know your name 2 years before the NFL, that fucking means something.
Yeah.
If I know who you are as a freshman, that is a big deal there. And dudes have been fucking glazing this man for the past 2 off seasons, waiting for him to get drafted. So yeah, I think it's see ya, Michael Mayer. You're not the number one anymore. But Devontae is still there, and as long as Devontae's there, the target cone is going to be a little limited. So dynasty, I'm not worried at all. Redraft right now this year. Yeah, I don't know, man. It might not be amazing year one, and if it is, well, then big cock Brock memes are going to be trending again for another season.
Yeah, and he was the big reason why Ladd McConkey's numbers weren't a little nicer as well. He was the number one target there, so that means something too for a Georgia, as we know, is one of the best college programs around, and he was the number one target for them. So, yes, absolutely. Future Brock, possibly the tight end 1. Right now, Brock, if he's top 5, you're happy. Ends up there. So,
where is he going in redraft right now? Do you happen to know off the top of your head?
Not really. I think he's kind of going right around Pitts and Andrews, though, maybe a little after those kind of guys. I got really one more that I want to talk about. I want to make sure we hit on. And if you have any others, you let me know. But Patriots wide receivers. They drafted 2 wide receivers, maybe more, 2 that matter this year. I'm not familiar with their 5th and 6th and 7th round picks. But Jalen Polk, very good season in Washington. Javon Baker, who was transferred to UCF from Alabama. So if Alabama recruited him, that typically means he's pretty talented. Then they've got guys like Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas, if you're looking for him on an app. Kendrick Bourne is still hanging around. Juju Smith-Schuster is still on the Patriots. I know he's pretty much just at an incredible decline so fast for Juju Smith-Schuster.
His fall off a cliff needs to be studied in museums. It's crazy. And then
you're taking dick pics.
It was so shocking when he was so young that even though he sucked all damn season, we still fell for it again the next year. We're like, that couldn't have been real. Couldn't have been real.
It's just he had that one really good season with Big Ben. And it was like, all right, man, this guy's legit. And then he just freaking fell off so hard. Crazy. And all right, I'm going to get into this philosophical thing after we finish the Pats. But is there anybody that you want to take a shot on here? Do you care at all about wide receivers in New England?
I like Pop Douglas a little bit. I I think, again, if you're talking dynasty, yeah, I mean, you always take a stab at a highly drafted wide receiver. I think it's always worth a stab, right? Even if you're not incredibly confident about it. And Drake May can't be much worse than what they had last year. So, yeah, I like Pop. But no, not really, because I think it's going to be another situation where the ball gets sprayed around a little bit, and I do not expect them to have a high volume passing offense with a rookie quarterback. And I mean, even if Drake May, I think you like Drake May pretty well. I like Drake May decently well, but I don't think that even the best version of Drake May, fulfilling our wildest desires, gets much over 20 touchdowns. So, I don't love it.
Patriots are a team that, for as bad as they project, I know this one, they are actually the lowest in expected points this year. They're 32 out of 32.
I think they were the lowest in actual points last year.
They were tied, I think, was it with the Broncos?
Yeah, they were tied with somebody.
I'm pretty sure it was the Broncos, yeah. So they don't expect to be much better. But I will say, and it's a big if, one of these rookie wide receivers, we'll just say Jalen Polk because he's the higher drafted one. If Jalen Polk, for example, can just become the go-to guy, like if him and Drake May have a connection or something like that, you can find a little bit of value there where they might make it into your flex spot, unexpectedly throughout the season. And I think it's about as high as it gets with their wide receiver room for me. I think Drake May as a dynasty piece is a nice pickup. I do think he's a good quarterback and he's going to be good in the future. Situation around him's got to get better. It's hard to be excited about a team that struggles to score more than like 13 points a week.
And there's, outside of Ramondre Stevenson, who I still like going into.
I like his talent. His situation sucks.
Right. But like, running backs on bad teams, if they catch passes, can be good. Running backs on bad teams that are just, that are just one and two, like, it's tough. But
yeah.
So I still like him, decently well for where he's being drafted this year. But yeah, I mean, until we can really see, is Jalen Polk going to break out? Is Pop Douglas going to break out? Kendrick Bourne, we kind of know what he's about, and he's hurt right now. KJ Osborne's a Jag. Like, until we can see some real target consolidation, I'm not interested.
Yeah, and that's the magic word, and that's pretty much what I'm alluding to. Like, if there can be some consolidation, there's some hidden value here, but that's far, far, far from a guarantee.
We just don't know. We don't know. Yeah. There might be more clarity going into the next season. I believe.
Well, the preseason might tell you something.
Yeah, fair enough. But I think that this could be one of those teams where going into next year there might be some good value where you take a season's worth of eyeball test. They cut a bunch of the fluff and junk from their team, and you say, like, okay, now we got rid of all these other players, and this player in their advanced stats looked pretty good. Now we can make real decisions. So for this season, not really.
For sure. Yeah, man. I'm right there with you. I think you're right. It is a dude next year kind of situation over there. And I like their draft.
They have a de facto GM right now that tells you everything you need to know about what's going on.
I like their draft though, because their team, they drafted with that direction to like, and I mean, how can you not? It was clear as day. You just look at the stats and like, oh shit, we can't score any freaking points. We better get some offensive weapons and a quarterback. So it was obvious, but I'm happy they just went full throttle with it. And we're like, Get a quarterback. Get some receivers.
It's a new day. It's a new day for them. Obviously, they owe Bill Belichick a whole lot for what he's done for them for many years. But it was time to move on. It had been time to move on for a couple seasons. It was so stale. It's not interesting me right now, but at least I'm happy about the fact that they have moved and turned the page on the Mac Jones experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Mac Jones is such a freaking bum, just so below average. I mean, so I want to talk about, we'll end on this. We'll have a bit of a philosophical conversation here about fantasy.
I like those.
About fantasy, of course. Just kind of thinking about the history of fantasy football. And I always find it fascinating how every year we look at these, just say, top 20 players coming off of draft boards, and they are just freaking locks. They're great. They're going to be great forever. And then life hits, football hits, linebackers hit, and it is like, what happened to that dude? You know, and the fall offs, like a big one for me, being a Giants fan, seeing how insanely good Odell Beckham was. And then he goes to the Browns and he's like kind of just mid. And then he goes to the Ravens and he's just kind of like an occasional target guy. And now he's on Miami. Like, what's he going to be there? But we talked about Juju's fall from grace. Look at Odell Beckham. But if you were to have Odell Beckham in a dynasty league, say back in 2013, 2014, you thought you had a bona fide stud for 10 years. Like, the crazy thing to me, like, that could happen to Justin Jefferson. That could happen to Jamar Chase. That could happen to CeeDee Lamb. Like, isn't that kind of a wild thing to think about?
Absolutely, because here's the thing. Well, first of all, I mean, I think that it's pretty what I'm going to say is pretty obvious here. We can't see the future, so all we can see is what our minds are trained to look at, which is just whatever history has told us and a steady progression. Some guy has a good rookie season. The presumption is, well, you should have a better sophomore season, and you should have a better junior season. Doesn't always work out that way, as you mentioned. And, you know, you have guys that, hey, you're a running back. You're 27. You're going to suck next year. Well, most of the time, many times that's true. But don't tell Derrick Henry that. Don't tell C-Mac that. Because there are differences. And
Frank Gore for life.
Frank Gore, right? And so, you know, or you take like me, I'm assuming that Bijan is a locked and loaded guy forever. Well, that may not be true, and then I'll be very sad if that happens. So, you know, it's just, you can't try to predict the future ever in life, but definitely you cannot project the future in football. There is way too much variance. It's way too much of a high injury game, and it is so predicated on athleticism. You can't always project how someone's body is going to break down. Some bodies stay good for a long time. Some of them don't. And sometimes the cliff hits in a very rude and sudden way. And there's nothing we can do about it. Because that's the thing, Andrew. Like you just said, hey, it can happen to Justin Jefferson. It can happen to Jamar Chase. Well, actionably, you are a Jamar Chase manager now. Like, what are you supposed to do about that? You can't do anything about it. Yeah,
Cry
you
yourself to
have
sleep.
to, like, there's nothing like actionable there. Like, there's nothing for you to like do except you take your best guess. This is a young player who seems to be on a crazy good trajectory. So you make your decision that way.
And you can't play scared. There's no point of playing if you're going to always be afraid of every player you have or, sell too early and things like that. But it's just wild to me when I think back and like how these players who are household names and like top 20 picks in fantasy, all those names that we used to put up there, they're not the same. It's pretty insane how fast these things turn around. I mean, Todd Gurley's another one. Looked like you were going to get 7-8 years of beauty. Le'Veon Bell was amazing.
Crazy. The Le'Veon Bell one was bad, but like Le'Veon had some different signs in terms of that you could have looked back on and been like, yeah, okay, maybe it made sense what happened. But the Todd Gurley, that one
was tragic.
Like it was that. Oh, hey, he's got this kind of weird thing going on with his knee. Oh, he's out for a few weeks. Oh, his career's over. It felt like it happened that fucking fast.
Didn't he have a cup of coffee in Atlanta or something like that?
Yeah, like he had like bounced around and a lot of teams were trying to regain that magic and it just never happened. It literally never happened again. And it can happen, which is why, because you can't predict the future on these guys and because football's a fucking rough game, you have to have a philosophy, and you may be wrong, you may be right, but you can't do what I did early in my playing days, where you're kind of tittering and tottering back and forth between, well, this guy says this guy says that, this guy says this. Well, they could both be right in different contexts. You got to have a philosophy and stick to it.
Yeah, and conviction about players.
And you're going to be right sometimes and you're going to be wrong sometimes, but the whole bouncing back and forth, and I don't mean necessarily between players, but just in terms of style. Whenever I'm in between players, I am always going to say who's older and who's younger. And maybe that makes me ageist. Maybe that makes me that means I'm going to miss out on one more amazing season of Raheem Mostert. Maybe that means I'm going to miss out on Devontae Adams still fucking doing it. It meant that I missed out on Mike Evans, right, last year, because I thought I was like, a little older. I'm not sure what his connection is going to be with Baker. There's a lot of different excuses that I can make. But in general, 9 times out of 10, I am going to, if I'm between two guys, I'm going to say, you're 27, you're 24, I'm going this way because that's just my philosophy.
Yeah.
It works out for me sometimes, it doesn't work out for me other times.
Yeah, and I am a little bit more forgiving, my philosophy. I'm a little bit more forgiving on the number next to their age. I'm just more about just talent. Like, I try to just look at pure talent, and like you can be a good 30-year-old receiver or running back, and just because this dude is 22 doesn't make him a better player. I get that philosophy, but I'm a little bit more forgiving, and I am also, my conviction is, if I don't think a player is good and I just don't see it on tape, and I am not about it, I just refuse to draft them, period. We've said it on this podcast before. We'll say it again.
I can talk myself into situations at times. And even in players that I'm not very convicted in, I'm like,
I won't do it.
Somebody's got to catch passes in this offense, right?
Yeah, and it's easy to do that. But if the player's not talented, in my opinion, I could be wrong. I have been wrong before plenty of times. I'll be wrong again. But I'll just use this guy as an example because we've brought him up many times in our podcast. I don't think Najee Harris is a good running back. So I'm not going to take him, period. I've passed up on him year in, year out because he had 100 catches with a washed-up noodle arm Big Ben, and people are still living off that season. I mean, I told you about this. I saw a highlight on Twitter where it was like, oh yeah, Najee Harris in practice cutting. Dude took 4 stutter steps to cut and then had no burst after. I'm like, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? He's not good.
It's tough, man. It's really tough. But yeah,
same thing with Quentin Johnston. He's got the opportunity in front of him again. Well, guess what? He had the opportunity last year. Guess what? He's still not high pointing balls. He still doesn't know how to play receiver. I don't have conviction about the player. I'm not going to take the player. Period.
You know, it's funny you say that, because that's it just goes back to the original thing we were saying. You got to just have convictions and stick with your convictions. But I'm thinking of all the times that my convictions were wrong. And one random example that I'm just skimming through names here was Brandon Ayuk. I saw him in his early career, his first, call it like season and a half-ish or whatever. Hated what I saw. He gave up on some routes, and I psychologically canceled him. He was just off my board forever. And guess what? He started having some good games. People were cashing in on waivers, and I said, no, sir, I'm out. Well, he turned into a perennial top 20 receiver. So it can go the other way too. Yeah. But, for people, and it's important to evaluate yourself and evaluate your own philosophies, because for me, maybe that's something I got to look at. Maybe I don't just quit guys after, a season and a half or whatever, where I just, hey, I didn't like what I saw. You're off my board. I think it's important to evaluate yourself too.
Absolutely. And it's okay to listen, we play a game that you're going to be wrong more than you're right. Even the most successful and intelligent fantasy football analysts, experts, whatever you want to call them, are wrong a lot. And that's all right. If you're somebody that's going to put your opinion out there on the internet or anywhere else, and then you get egg on your face after, well, guess what? Every single person that's ever talked about fantasy football has been wrong on some level at some point. So can't get butt hurt, can't play scared. Yeah, I just started, saying what I always find amazing is how we have these opinions of players that are just unbreakable, will be great, and all of a sudden they're not. Like, who is that player this year? Who are those players this year? Pretty crazy. So
yeah, I think that would be a good follow-up podcast to have. Who's unbreakable and who's Mr. Glass? Let's make it happen.
Well, with that, man, I think I'm good to wrap this thing up. How you feeling?
I'm good. I enjoyed swimming the murky waters with you today. I hope the listeners got something from the conversation. We're as confused as you are, but we tried to swim in that nasty French river so that you don't have to, and picked up E. coli so you don't have to, and hopefully we got some good gems for you.
Sometimes just talking about it can bring some things to the surface, and hopefully we did that today. I don't know, but screw Bo Nix. That's my big thing. Sucks.
If all right, y'all. Like, subscribe, do all the things, and I'm sorry, Dynasty Bros. It is 11 p.m. We will see you tomorrow. You'll find out my pick at 10 a.m.
Sharp. Better be on that shit. All right, y'all. Peace.
Later, people.